What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected voices sits down for what should be a simple morning interview, only to find himself under attack by a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 42 seconds, a legendary actor would make a decision that would leave an entire studio speechless, walking off set after refusing to be disrespected one more time. Morgan Freeman arrived at the Today Show studio that morning expecting a typical promotional interview, the kind he'd done hundreds of times before. A few questions about his latest project, maybe some light banter about his career, and he'd be on his way. But from the moment he sat down across from Savannah Guthrie, something felt different. The energy was off. The usual warmth that guests expect from morning television was nowhere to be found. "So Morgan," Savannah began, barely looking up from her notes, "let's talk about your new film. Though I have to say, at your age, I'm surprised you're still taking film on action roles. Don't you think it's time to, step back a little?" The other panelists, Hoda Kotb and Craig Melvin, exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the tone anyone expected to open with. Morgan, ever the professional, smiled politely and adjusted himself in his seat. "Well, Savannah, I believe age is just a number. As long as I'm physically capable and the roles are meaningful, I don't see why I should stop doing what I love," he responded calmly. But Savannah wasn't satisfied with that answer. She leaned forward, her expression sharp. "But surely you must realize that audiences want to see younger, more relevant faces these days. I mean, how much longer can you really keep this up?" she pressed. Hoda jumped in quickly, trying to redirect. "Morgan, I think what we're all really excited about is the depth you bring to every character. Your performance in this film has been getting incredible reviews." Morgan nodded gratefully toward Hoda. "Thank you, Hoda. That means a lot. This character was particularly special to me because—" "Let me stop you right there," Savannah interrupted, holding up her hand. "I've seen the film, and honestly, I didn't find it particularly groundbreaking. In fact, I thought your performance was pretty standard for what you usually do. Don't you ever get tired of playing the same type of character over and over?" The studio went quiet. Craig shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly taken aback by his co-host's aggressive approach. This wasn't journalism. This was something else entirely. Morgan's smile faded slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. Each role I take on has its own unique challenges and—" "Oh, come on." Savannah cut him off again, waving her hand dismissively. "The wise older man who imparts knowledge, the mentor figure, the authoritative voice. You've been doing variations of the same thing for decades. Don't you think it's becoming predictable?" "Savannah," Craig interjected, his voice carrying a note of warning. "I think we should." "I'm just asking the questions everyone at home is thinking," Savannah snapped back at Craig, before turning her attention back to Morgan. "People are tired of seeing the same old faces doing the same old things. Hollywood needs fresh blood, fresh perspectives. Surely you can acknowledge that." Morgan took a deep breath, his hands folded calmly in his lap. "I respect your opinion, Savannah, but I don't agree that my work has become predictable. Every project I choose—" "Your choices?" Savannah laughed, and it wasn't a warm laugh. "Let's be honest, Morgan. At this point in your career, are you really choosing roles, or are you just taking whatever comes your way because the offers aren't what they used to be?" Hoda's jaw dropped. She looked at Morgan with apologetic eyes, clearly mortified by her co-host's behavior. "That's completely out of line," Hoda said firmly, looking directly at Savannah. "Morgan is a legend in this industry, and—" "A legend living in the past," Savannah interrupted, not even looking at Hoda. "Look, I'm just being real here. This is what journalism is supposed to be, asking the tough questions, not just throwing softball compliments around." Morgan's expression had shifted now. The polite smile was gone, replaced by something harder, more serious. "There's a difference between tough questions and disrespect, Savannah. And right now, you're crossing that line." "Am I?" Savannah challenged, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "Or am I just the first person willing to say out loud what everyone's thinking? That maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to accept that your moment has passed." Craig stood up from his seat, clearly done with where this was going. "Okay, I think we need to take a break here. This is not—" "Sit down, Craig," Savannah ordered, her voice sharp. "I'm not finished." But Morgan was standing up now too, slowly removing his microphone. The legendary calm that he was known for remained, but there was steel in his voice when he spoke. "Actually, Savannah, you are finished. At least as far as this interview is concerned, Morgan said quietly. Excuse me? Savannah's eyes widened, apparently shocked that her guest was pushing back. You can't just walk out of an interview. Watch me, Morgan replied simply. Hoda stood up as well, reaching out toward Morgan. Morgan, please. We can continue this conversation in a respectful way. Savannah is just. Savannah is being incredibly rude and unprofessional, Morgan stated clearly. And I don't have to sit here and be insulted on live television. I've spent over 50 years building a career based on respect and integrity. I'm not going to compromise that now. Savannah actually laughed again, a harsh sound that echoed through the suddenly tense studio. This is unbelievable. You're that fragile? You can't handle a few honest questions? Honest questions, Morgan repeated, his voice rising slightly for the first time. You haven't asked me a single honest question since I sat down. You've made assumptions, you've been condescending, and you've shown nothing but disrespect. That's not journalism, Savannah. That's just cruelty disguised as courage. The crew members around the set had stopped what they were doing, all eyes locked on the confrontation unfolding before them. This was not scripted. This was real, raw, and completely unprecedented. You know what your problem is? Savannah shot back, standing up now to face Morgan directly. You can't handle the truth. Your generation had its time, and now it's over. The world has moved on, and you're just too stubborn to see it. Craig stepped between them, his hands up in a peacekeeping gesture. All right, that's enough. Savannah, you need to stop. Right, now. But Savannah wasn't backing down. No, Craig, someone needs to say this. We spend so much time coddling these aging actors, pretending like they're still relevant, still important, when the reality is that most people change the channel when they see. When they see what, Savannah? Morgan interrupted, his voice calm but powerful. When they see someone who looks like me? When they see someone who's been working in this industry since before you were born? When they see someone who's earned their place through decades of hard work and dedication? Don't you dare try to make this about race, Savannah snapped. This has nothing to do with. I didn't mention race, Morgan said firmly. You just did. I'm talking about respect, basic human respect, something you seem to have forgotten the meaning of. Hoda moved closer to Morgan, her voice gentle. Morgan, I'm so sorry. This is not how we do things here. This is not representative of. I know it's not Hoda, Morgan said, his tone softening when he addressed her. You and Craig have been nothing but professional. But I won't sit here and let anyone, I don't care who they are, treat me like I'm irrelevant or washed up. I've earned better than that. Savannah crossed her arms tighter, her face flushed. So, you're just gonna run away? That's your solution? I'm not running away from anything, Morgan replied, straightening his jacket. I'm choosing not to participate in whatever this is. There's a difference. You want to attack someone? Find someone else. But you won't use me as your target for whatever point you're trying to prove. The point I'm trying to prove, Savannah said through gritted teeth, is that celebrities need to be held accountable. They need to be challenged. They can't just expect to waltz in here and get treated like royalty. Held accountable for what exactly? Morgan asked, genuine confusion in his voice. For having a career? For having. Still working? For being successful? What exactly is my crime here, Savannah? She sputtered for a moment, searching for words. For taking up space that could go to younger talent, for cashing in on name recognition instead of actual merit. Craig shook his head in disbelief. Do you hear yourself right now? This is Morgan Freeman. He's one of the most talented actors of all time. According to who? Savannah challenged. According to old critics who grew up in his era. Maybe it's time we reevaluate who we call talented. Morgan looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was sad rather than angry. You know what's really tragic about this, Savannah? It's not that you're attacking me. I've dealt with critics my entire career. It's that you genuinely believe you're doing something righteous here. You think tearing someone down makes you brave or honest. But all it does is make you cruel. I'm not cruel, Savannah insisted, but her voice had lost some of its edge. I'm realistic. No, Morgan corrected. You're bitter. And I don't know why. And frankly, it's not my problem to figure out. But I do know that I don't need to stand here and be the target of it. Hoda reached out and touched Morgan's arm gently. Please don't let this experience color your view of all of us. We're not all like this. Morgan patted her hand kindly. I know that. Hoda, you've been gracious from the moment I walked in. Craig, too. This is on one person, not the whole show. Don't act like you're being magnanimous, Savannah interjected. You're embarrassing yourself right now, walking out like a child who didn't get his way. Actually, Craig said, turning to face Savannah directly, the only person who should be embarrassed here is you. What you've done this morning is completely unacceptable. Savannah's face went red. Don't you dare lecture me, Craig. I was trying to do real journalism while you two sit. They're lobbing easy questions like we're running some kind of fan club. There's a difference between tough journalism and being needlessly hostile, Craig replied firmly. And you crossed that line about 10 minutes ago. Morgan moved toward the edge of the set, ready to leave. I appreciate you both, he said to Hoda and Craig, but I really do need to go. Wait, Savannah called out, and something in her voice had changed. It was less aggressive, more panicked. You can't just leave. We're in the middle of a live show. Morgan turned back to her. That's exactly why I can leave. Because it's live, because people are watching, and because I refuse to sit here and pretend like what you're doing is acceptable. Someone needs to draw a line, and apparently that someone is me. You're making a huge mistake, Savannah warned. Walking off this set will not look good for you. Neither will what you've been doing for the last 15 minutes, Morgan countered. But at least I can sleep tonight knowing I stood up for myself with dignity. Hoda was near tears now, clearly distressed by the entire situation. Morgan, I promise you, we will address this. This is not who we are. I believe you, Morgan said sincerely, but that doesn't change what happened here today. And it doesn't mean I have to stay and endure more of it. Craig walked over to stand beside Morgan. I'll walk you out. This has gone far enough. You're going to abandon your post? Savannah asked incredulously. In the middle of a live broadcast? I'm going to show respect to a guest who deserves it, Craig replied without hesitation. Something you should have been doing from the start. Savannah looked around, seemingly realizing for the first time that everyone in the studio was staring at her with varying degrees of shock and disapproval. The camera operators, the producers in the background, the crew members, all of them looked uncomfortable with what they'd just witnessed. This is ridiculous, Savannah muttered, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. He came on this show to promote his movie. That's what this was supposed to be about. And instead, you made it about attacking him, Hoda said quietly, but with unmistakable disappointment. Why, Savannah? What was the point of any of this? Savannah didn't answer. She just stood there, arms still crossed, watching as Morgan Freeman prepared to walk off the set of the Today Show. You know, Morgan said, pausing one more time before he left, when I started in this business, there were people who didn't think I'd make it. People who said I was too old when I got my first major role. I was in my 50s when my career really took off. And you know what I learned from that experience? That timing doesn't matter as much as talent and perseverance. That age is irrelevant when you have something real to offer. But most importantly, I learned that you can't let other people's limited vision define your worth. He looked directly at Savannah. I hope someday you learn that lesson too. Because right now, the only person whose relevance I'm questioning is yours. Not because of your age or your looks or anything superficial, but because of how you've chosen to treat another human being who came here in good faith. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Savannah seemed at a loss for words. Goodbye, Hoda. Goodbye, Craig, Morgan said with a slight nod. Thank you for your kindness. And then, without another word, without drama or fanfare, Morgan Freeman walked off the Today Show set, his head held high, his dignity intact. Craig followed him, leaving Savannah and Hoda standing in the wreckage of what should have been a routine interview. Well, Hoda said softly, looking at Savannah with an expression that was hard to read. I hope you're happy with yourself. Savannah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time that morning, she seemed genuinely at a loss. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath. The producers were frantically trying to figure out what to do next, how to salvage the show, how to move forward after such an unprecedented moment. But Morgan Freeman was already gone, walking through the corridors of the studio with Craig by his side. I'm so sorry, Craig said as they walked. That was completely out of line. I don't know what got into her. Morgan shook his head. It's not your fault, Craig. We all make our own choices. She made hers, and I made mine. Still, Craig continued, you deserve so much better than that. We all let you down. No, Morgan corrected gently. You stood up for me. You and Hoda both did. That matters more than you might think. They reached the exit, and Morgan paused, turning to face the younger host. "Can I give you some advice?" Morgan asked. "Of course," Craig replied immediately. "Don't let what happened in there change who you are," Morgan said. "Keep being kind, keep being respectful, keep treating your guests with dignity, because that's what separates good broadcasters from great ones. Not the tough questions you ask, but the humanity you bring to every conversation." Craig nodded, clearly moved. "I will. I promise." Morgan extended his hand, and Craig shook it firmly. "And hey," Morgan added with a slight smile, "next time you want to interview me, give me a call. I trust you." Craig smiled back, though his eyes were still troubled by what had transpired. "I will. And thank you for handling that with such grace. A lot of people would have lost their temper. Losing my temper would have given her what she wanted," Morgan explained. "A spectacle, a scene, something she could point to and say, 'See, he's the problem, not me.' But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I simply chose not to participate in my own humiliation." "That takes a lot of strength," Craig observed. "It takes knowing your worth," Morgan replied. "And I know mine. I don't need anyone's validation, especially not from someone who's more interested in creating drama than conducting an interview." With that, Morgan Freeman walked out of the building, leaving behind one of the most shocking moments in morning television history. Back in the studio, Savannah stood alone at the anchor desk, the weight of what she'd done beginning to settle on her shoulders. The other crew members avoided making eye contact with her. The producers were on their phones, no doubt already doing damage control. Hoda approached her slowly, her expression serious. "What were you thinking?" Hoda asked, her voice low but intense. "That was Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman. And you attacked him like he was some reality star looking for attention." "I was just trying to ask real questions," Savannah said weakly. But even she didn't sound convinced by her own defense anymore. "Real questions?" Hoda repeated. "You insulted his age, his career choices, his relevance. That wasn't journalism. That was a personal attack, and you know it." Savannah sat down heavily in her chair, the reality of the situation finally breaking through her defenses. I don't know what I thought. You thought you could make a name for yourself by going after a legend?" Hoda said bluntly. "You thought being controversial would get you attention. And you know what? You're right. It will get you attention. Just not the kind you want." The studio around them was buzzing with activity as the crew tried to figure out what to do for the rest of the broadcast. But for Savannah, sitting there in the aftermath of her own destructive behavior, it felt like everything had stopped. Meanwhile, Craig caught up with Morgan one more time, just as he was about to get into his car. "Morgan," Craig called out, slightly out of breath from jogging across the parking lot. Morgan turned, waiting patiently. "I just wanted you to know," Craig said when he reached him, "that this will be addressed. What happened in there, it's not going to be swept under the rug." Morgan nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Craig. But honestly, my concern isn't about punishment or consequences for her. My concern is that this kind of behavior has become normalized. That somewhere along the way, we decided that being harsh equals being honest. That cruelty equals courage." "You're right," Craig agreed, "and that needs to change." "It does," Morgan said, "but it starts with people like you. People who still understand that you can be tough and fair without being mean. That you can ask difficult questions without attacking someone's character or worth." Craig nodded seriously, absorbing every word. "You're going to have a long career ahead of you," Morgan continued. "Make sure it's one you're proud of. Don't let the pressure to compete or create viral moments turn you into something you're not." "I won't," Craig promised. "Thank you for that." Morgan smiled warmly. "You're welcome. Now, I really do need to go. But it was good meeting you, Craig, even under these circumstances." "It was an honor meeting you too," Craig replied sincerely. As Morgan's car pulled away from the studio, Craig stood there for a moment, reflecting on everything that had just happened. Inside that building was chaos, confusion, and probably a lot of very difficult conversations about to take place. But out here, watching one of Hollywood's most respected actors drive away with his dignity intact, Craig felt something different. He felt inspired. Inspired to be better, to do better, to make sure that his platform was used to uplift rather than tear down. Back inside the studio, the show was somehow continuing. Hoda was doing her best to keep things moving, to maintain some sense of normalcy for the live viewers. But everyone knew that what had happened would be the only thing anyone remembered about this particular episode. Savannah sat at the desk, going through the motions, reading her teleprompter, conducting the remaining segments. But the energy was gone. The confidence she'd carried earlier had evaporated, replaced by something that looked a lot like regret. During a commercial break, one of the producers approached her. "We need to talk," the producer said simply. "After the show." Savannah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The remainder of the broadcast felt endless. Every minute dragged on as Savannah went through segment after segment, knowing that everyone was watching her differently now. Not as a fearless journalist, but as the person who had driven Morgan Freeman off the set. When the show finally ended and the cameras turned off, Savannah remained seated while the crew dispersed. Hoda had already left, not saying a word to her. Craig had stayed behind to help smooth things over with the remaining guests. The producer who had spoken to her earlier came back, along with two others. "Conference room," one of them said, "now." As Savannah stood up to follow them, she caught a glimpse of herself in one of the monitors. She looked tired, small, nothing like the commanding presence she'd tried to project during the interview with Morgan. And in that moment, she understood what Morgan had meant. She had thought that being aggressive made her strong, that challenging a guest made her brave, that pushing boundaries made her relevant. But all it had done was reveal her own insecurities, her own fears about her place in an industry that was constantly evolving. She had projected all of that onto Morgan Freeman, a man who had spent decades proving his worth, his talent, his staying power. And in doing so, she had shown everyone watching exactly who she really was. Not a fearless journalist, just someone who had forgotten the most basic rule of broadcasting: treat people with respect. As she walked toward that conference room, toward whatever consequences awaited her, Savannah finally understood the lesson that Morgan Freeman had tried to teach her. But by then, it was already too late.